What do you wish what kind of Europe should come out after this hopefully going uphill again?
Yeah, well, as you say, Ireland is, I say, the only country that is more affected by Brexit than Ireland is the United Kingdom itself, of course. And it's not our policy, but we have to deal with the reality of it. But no matter what happens, Ireland's place is at the heart of Europe, at the common European home, which we helped to build. And we're founder members of the euro, founder members of the single market, and we want to be at the heart of all future, or at least almost all future European developments. I think in many ways when you spoke about the ever closer union, that's very much the language of the Treaty of Rome. And even then was aspirational. I don't think anyone ever believed that we would bring unity in Europe to the extent that we all became the one country or ceased to be nation states. I don't think anybody ever really envisaged that. But there are lots of areas that we can deepen integration. Mark's already mentioned realising more benefits from the single market. We've all signed up to greater cooperation in defence through PESCO recently, and there are many more things that we can do. And actually, I find the debate about a transfer union quite interesting because in many ways we've always had a certain element of a transfer union within Europe, largely around structural funds. And for most of the period of my country's membership of the European Union, we were a net beneficiary and we used structural funds to build our infrastructure. And by building our infrastructure, we were able to unleash the economic potential of our country. And now that we're net contributors, we don't want to pull back from that. We want to say to the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, we want to invest in your countries too. And help you to unlock your economic potential, because that will actually make us better off as well. So we have elements of a transfer union already, and one I think that we could develop further is the whole idea of a banking union, guaranteeing people savings and deposits across Europe and reducing the risk for individual nation states. But if we enter into that, we absolutely need to be careful and be precautionary. That every country is up to standard in terms of its financial regulation and the health of its banks. And I come from a country that knows a little bit about that.
I remember.
Having put it right, we want to make sure that's the case across Europe.
So there is no fear on the panel that the Franco-German, whatever axis or whatever you call it, better working together will leave you behind, for instance?
I suppose I'd make three very brief points. The first is that those of us who believe in Europe and believe that Europe on balance is a good thing for all of our countries can only welcome France and Germany cooperating, becoming an engine for further development in Europe. And Europe at its best was that period when Mitterrand was president in France and Kohl was president in Germany under the Delors Commission, driving forward things like the euro, like enlargement, like European citizenship. Those things wouldn't have happened without that Franco-German engine and that Franco-German alliance. So it's something that I welcome, but I am also cautious about because the Europe of the past, the historical Europe, if you like, was a Europe not just of empires, but a Europe of large states that went to war on occasion, very often overran small states, and on occasion would come together at various conferences, the big countries, decide what was best for Europe and would inform the small countries afterwards. And we definitely don't want to see that. We don't want to see meetings in Paris and Berlin that only countries with more than 40 million people are invited to attend and the smaller countries being told afterwards what's good for Europe. So the spirit that we need is very much one that I think was encapsulated by that great German foreign minister, Hans-Dietrich Genscher. And during that period, he said that every day he would ask himself the question, what do the small countries think? And if Germany, in particular, and France as well, operate on that basis, I think that engine, I think we can be in that car, to put it that way, with that engine in it. But if they don't, then I think difficulties will arise. Finally, the departure of the United Kingdom does change things. It is going to be a different Europe without the United Kingdom there, a country that was very much part of the free market, the free trade lobby. They currently wish to lead the single market, but in many ways they were the architects of the single market in the 1980s. And that's why those countries who are free traders, free enterprise, believe in low taxation, generally speaking, will need to work together and build new alliances, and that involves countries like Ireland, the Benelux countries, Nordics, Baltics, also some of the states of Central Europe that actually are very pro-enterprise as well, and some of the Mediterranean countries. So it is going to change that power dynamic, but it's up to us to influence it. At a time when the United States is stepping back from free trade agreements, at a time when the United Kingdom is leaving the largest trading bloc in the world, and we have an opportunity to connect to other parts of the world through our trade agreements. And we've done that already very successfully with Canada, with CETA, good agreements in place with, I'm kind of doing your job for you. I'm praising you here, by the way. And also, of course, Japan and South Korea. And if we can get it right with Mercosur, depending on various sensitivities there, of course, I think that's the way we can actually project our power as Europe, but also bring good things to the world. And the second, I believe, is very much through our commitment to international development, where we as Europeans could and should do an awful lot more. And one of the ideas that people talk about a lot is the idea of a Marshall Plan for Africa. And after the devastation of the Second World War, America made sure that Western Europe was rebuilt. And it's in our interests, I believe, for us to come together as Europeans and try to do something similar for Africa. We've already seen the consequences of Libya failing as a state. A small country, 4 million people, medium to high income, and when it failed as a state, there were enormous humanitarian consequences for people in Libya and a very negative effect on Europe. And if much larger African states were to go the wrong way, imagine the humanitarian crisis and imagine the impact on Europe. So it's very much in our interest to make sure that Africa succeeds in the 21st century, that it becomes politically stable, and that over the next decades, a bit like China and East Asia, their economies become ones that we want to trade with rather than send aid to. But we have a responsibility to make that happen. And I think those are the two areas where Europe could show real leadership in the world.
Short.
Yeah, it's very, very short. To build on what Leo is saying, it all depends on the issue. In many cases, it will be the individual member states who will conduct a foreign policy of their nation. But on other occasions, like the free trade agreements, like what is now happening with Africa, to take out the root causes of migration as part of a step-by-step approach to control the migratory flows. Take what we did with Turkey. At the height of the Syrian refugee crisis. It took 4 days from the south of Turkey to get into Berlin or Amsterdam. And then in February, March, we were able, with Turkey, to come to conclusions together, a deal which basically secured reception capacity in Turkey for the Syrian refugees, and therefore being able to control that migratory flow. And that was something we did as a collective, as a European Union. So it depends on the issues.
But the Iran issue is an example. The Iran issue,
Iran issue
Europe
is a very
surely
good
has
example.
showed the leadership to preserve the agreement.
And there was Federica Mogherini in a leading role. So I think this is good. And the old saying of Kissinger, I want to have one phone number whom to call in the European Union, and now in his days he had 6, now he would have 28. Well, it will depend on the issue.
I think the other one, if I may intervene again, is our own neighbourhood in terms of enlargement. We have in the Western Balkans, Albania, Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia, a number of countries, which could become destabilised. And the best way that we can look after our own neighbourhood, like the Western Balkans, is to assure them that there is a pathway towards membership. Enlargement hasn't finished.
Yes,
and that's one of the areas where I think we can actually do the right thing as Europeans.
Yes, I think, as a DG of Deutsche Welle with this Germany's global broadcaster, I can assure you, and you know it yourself, that the European model is quite attractive for a lot of people around this world. So one should maybe not be too critical about them oneself, but also see the attractiveness of the model and the rule of law and all these kind of things. But now we have also another guest here not on this panel, not a surprise guest. He's not arrived yet, so just cool down. So the US President has landed in Davos, and everybody's a bit excited for different reasons, I presume. And tomorrow he will be on this stage, exactly here. He will hold his speech to all of us here in Davos. And Now, to all of you, if you have one wish to have one idea to write down in his speech for tomorrow, what would this be?
That he,
Mark, you start.
Well, that he will acknowledge that for the United States, being the leader of the free world, being the biggest economy in the world by far, that it is crucial to maintain the international legal order, to keep on investing in the UN, in NATO, in the WTO, and that you cannot run the world on a bilateral basis. And I think we need to have that dialogue with the American president and to convince him of the necessity of the United States with its leadership capacity and capability to keep on investing in this international legal order. It is crucial. For the Netherlands, we are one of the 3 most internationally connected countries in the world. We are in absolute terms the 5th biggest exporter. And for many other countries in the European Union and all over the world, it is crucial to maintain that order. And we need the US as a champion.
Leo, what would be your thought for this speech?
Oh, I wish I could write that one, but I don't think I'm going to be given that offer. But to give you a hypothetical answer to a hypothetical question is actually very similar to Mark's. It is perhaps an acknowledgement that what makes America great is actually American values. This is a country that, by and large, has been a force for good in the world down the centuries. It's a country that made itself great by trading with the world. It's a country that made itself great by accepting migrants from all over the world, including from my country, took the best brains and the hardest working people from all over the world, and they built America. And also it's a country that, by being involved in the world, saved the world from fascism, yes, and then from communism thereafter. And when America disengages from the world, when it doesn't live up to those very American values, the world becomes a more dangerous place and a lesser place.
Antonio.
Bien, être conseiller de M. Trump, c'est une des tâches plus à risquer du monde, donc je préfère dire ce que...
Mais vous êtes bien qualifié quand même.
Non, c'est pour ça que je veux dire que l'Union européenne doit comprendre qu'il y a un nouveau cadre avec cette administration américaine. Et que c'est une grande opportunité pour l'Union européenne, notamment dans le domaine de la liberté du commerce, de prendre la devance. Et c'est à nous maintenant, l'Union européenne, qu'il faut tenir les valeurs que l'Occident a fait partager et rêver à des millions d'êtres humains partout dans le monde. Les valeurs de liberté, de respect de la dignité des gens humains, la liberté du commerce, le rule of law, toutes ces valeurs sont les valeurs de l'Union européenne. Il faut le tendre. Et c'est pour ça que l'Union européenne ne peut pas perdre du temps, notamment avec la négociation du Mercosur. Parce que c'est une négociation clé pour la relation transatlantique, parce que de l'autre côté de l'Atlantique, il n'y a pas seulement les États-Unis, il n'y a pas seulement le Canada, il y a aussi l'Amérique centrale, l'Amérique du Sud, et l'accord du Mercosur, c'est clé. C'est très important, CETA. Mais la vérité, c'est que le Mercosur, c'est 10 fois plus important que ce qu'on a fait avec CETA. Et donc, Madame Malmström, force, il faut tenir, et il faut conclure le plus vite possible l'accord avec le Mercosur et avec nos partenaires de l'autre côté de l'Atlantique.
Okay, that's a challenge.
Ça va dépendre de bœuf, non?
So, Cecilia, you had now time to think about the whole speech of Mr. Trump, to write it down. So what would be your thought?
Well, I've actually rewrote it in my head. I would have lots of messages that I hope that the President would say. But yeah, the fact that he's coming here is a signal. It's always better that you talk with each other than about each other. Now he has managed for the whole Davos to talk about him. Now let's see if we can talk with him as well. But I fully agree. I hope he comes with the message that the US wants to engage with the world, that a stronger America is is crucial to have a stronger world, and we can only be strong together. So multilateralism, international organizations, I hope he will announce that he was only joking when he annulled America's participation to the climate agreement in Paris, and I hope that he will engage with us in building a better world, because there are issues that he brings up that where we can share his criticism against others and so on. We are willing to work with him, but it has to be within the established order of the multilateral global rules that we together have agreed, where they have taken a lead. All these institutions that we talk about, America founded them, and it has been good for the US. So I hope he comes here with the message of engagement. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. And then I would have a lot of internal messages, but I leave that for the American audience.
Timothy, before I give you the last word, which is, I think, great. So,
position of power.
And I would ask you in the room if you have 2 questions. I would take 2 questions if you want. Okay, I see one over there, and please introduce yourself. And a good question is not longer than 20 seconds.
I'm Steve Howard. I'm a Brexit refugee living in the Netherlands, and desperately trying to hang on to a sense of humour, Commissioner. Is it possible that our friends in Europe can actually offer a choice to Britain to come to stay in with a twin-track Europe? David Cameron failed to negotiate any sort of outcome, but I think just a small olive branch might tempt people over the line.
Okay, who wants to answer?
Well, I think Cameron negotiated an excellent package. And even the Eastern European countries were able, after some considerable pressure, to accept it, including an emergency brake on people moving from the eastern part of the European Union into the western part of the European Union at the Commission level. And I think it was an excellent result. And the debate went very well in the UK as long as it was about the economy. But as soon as the debate shifted to other issues like values and sovereignty and migration, the thing started to collapse with the result we have seen. What now is necessary is for Theresa May to decide what she wants. We cannot have a situation in which we have to decide for her what the future relationship with the European Union will be. She has to decide, and she knows that single market means free movement of people. Customs union or other arrangements means certain obligations. And yes, if the UK is not willing to do anything, you will end up in a free trade agreement. And what I desperately hope, of course, is that they will at least partly come back to the decision and be able to somehow stay connected to the internal market and the customs union.
Okay, so I think this is it. And Tim, your last thought towards our discussion, and maybe also what you would write into the speech of your president.
That's more intimacy than I would wish. So with Europe, my one thought, my concluding thought is the mechanisms of European identity have been the idea that economics leads to politics, leads to economics, leads to politics. That's true to an extent. The second mechanism of European identity was we will remember the war. That is wearing itself out. When I think of institutional renewal in Europe, I think first of all of institutions that would allow the young of Europe to have a moment of encounter with Europe while they are young, to make it meaningful for them, some passage through Europe. I think that's very important. When it comes to Mr. Trump, I will spin this a slightly different direction, not being European and not being a diplomat or a politician. Mr. Trump is a very skilled entertainer. At the end of the day, he has an audience of one. Everyone else is a moving prop in his production. It's very important not to get yourselves too involved in his story, whether that's as a way to motivate yourselves to do good things or whether it's as a hope that he will come around. Just don't get involved in the story. His audience in the end is only himself. It's very kind to hear these words of praise about the United States of America. They apply to a country which has 50 states, numerous cities, countless non-governmental organizations, 300 million citizens, and all kinds of ways to engage. The United States will need European engagement. We will need it in much the way Europe has needed our engagement in the past.
So, this is it. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for all of you who had been into our live stream, and the program continues. Have a good evening. Thank you very much to the panel.